the CoCo Crew Podcast is hosted by CyberEars. If you are serious about your podcast hosting needs, you should check out CyberEars. Whether you are a podcaster, a radio host, a musician, a narrator, an audiobook author, or simply a school, church, corporation, or anyone else with an audio recording that needs to be hosted or distributed, you should check out cyberears.com. Unlimited bandwidth, fast, reliable, and rugged servers with no hidden fees. CyberEars, your audio, your terms.
Listen, it's getting closer.
Hey, you got your CoCo 3 yet? Hey, you got your CoCo 3 yet?
You're listening to the CoCo Crew Podcast, a delicious adventure into the world of retro computing news and information featuring the Tandy Color Computer. All right, everyone, welcome back to the CoCo Crew. This is episode 9, and I am John Linville, and I'm here with
Neil Blanchard, as the French would pronounce it.
Neil with his nod to French culture there. He's a little too close to Quebec to ignore the French. So, anyway, and we are the CoCo Crew. And so we're back for another episode, and it's getting closer and closer to CoCo Fest. And maybe as usual this time of year, there's more and more CoCo activity going on and people trying to get their projects ready. So lots of exciting stuff to cover. We're actually on a little bit shorter cycle this month. I think we're going to try to bring in so that we can get the episode 11 in before the CoCo, which would actually be our 12th episode, since we started at 0. But then episode 12 will be our CoCo Fest recap. Next couple of episodes may be on a little bit shorter cycle. Of course, that remains to be seen if we can actually pull that off. As we sit here, it's the middle of February, and so CoCo Fest is just about 2 months away. Neil, are you getting ready for CoCo Fest?
Oh, I'm getting ready. Definitely excited.
Yeah, we just had another Glenside CoCo Fest preparation call this week. Not a lot to report there, but still things tightening down. We're getting ready. The CoCo Fest is coming, so good stuff. So, Neil, you been working on any cool projects lately?
I just finished one, actually. I kind of, well, not really CoCo related, but it was for a Tandy 1000. I did a Dallas CMOS battery, I guess RTC chip rework. So that was kind of a neat project.
Very cool stuff. Yeah, so I've been working on a few things myself lately. I did a circuit board design for a converter to use the Sega Genesis joypads with the CoCo 3, which is basically the similar design to some other stuff that's out there for using Atari joysticks, because the Sega joypad pinouts is largely the same. But the Genesis joypads have some differences to the electronics, and they can cause problems when you hook them up, depending on how the adapters are designed. So my adapter circuit takes care of making sure the buttons don't conflict with the keyboard, and then also my circuit has a switching circuit part of it that plugs in that you can actually make use of the extra buttons on the Genesis joypad. So anyway, I got that design done and sent out for circuit boards and got some back. And so I built one, found a few problems in the design, but basically ready to spin a final version of the board. I'm just looking for looking for an enclosure, and so that we can do the final board spin. And then my buddy Neil, he take over the business from there. Are you ready to build some boards, Neil?
I am all set. I got the solder station all ready to go here. Looking forward to getting that going. I can see this might spawn some programmers into taking advantage of those extra buttons.
I hope so. It's kind of a chicken and egg problem out there. So the adapters are useful even if you don't use the extra buttons, and even if you don't have a Sega Genesis joypad, it'll still work fine with either the Sega Master System joypad or with just an Atari joystick, depending on how many buttons you need to use. So hopefully we can get them out there, and once there's enough out there, maybe there'll be some talented young programmers that'll take advantage of them, or maybe it'll just be me. Anyway, so that's something to look forward to. Aside from that, still spinning up, but I've got my cartridge labels designed for Farfall to go into our new injection molded cartridges, and starting to ramp up on collecting parts. So hopefully there'll be some Farfall carts produced here in the next couple of months. So that's exciting for me.
Those look very nice. I saw the picture you posted. I was pretty impressed.
So along with some Farfall carts, I need to do I was thinking of doing maybe carts for Xmas Rush. I might do a cart for Follow CoCo, my Simon clone. I was thinking that might make a nice card.
For
it's
sure.
Available already for use with Mark's flash cartridge, but some people might want a separate cartridge with a appropriate sticker and all that kind of stuff.
So now I can see you have to fulfill the back order on all those Farfall games.
I sure hope so. People still want one. I'd like to get them out there. And I know there's the cartridge collectors that got to have them all. I'm looking at you, Vincent, and a couple of others. Hopefully everybody will want a Farfall cartridge to go along with all that. Let's see. Well, that kind of rolls us into eBay discussions. Neil, you done anything cool on eBay lately? Selling or buying? Or
No, nothing again this month. It's 2 dry months now. How about yourself?
I participated a little in losing the bid on another one of those program pack files. I'm pretty sure Vincent ended up with it. It was a nice auction too, because it not only was the file, but it of course it packs, some of which were on the rare side, like 7-card stud. So that one went for a tidy princely sum.
I was actually winning that auction right up to the last 40 seconds. I was winning it at 122.
Oh yeah,
and then that was it. I got outbid.
Were you trying to buy me a gift there?
I was. I figured it'd be a little peace offering.
Oh, shame.
I'm not really collecting those pack files, but I'm definitely collecting the cartridges, right? So I figured it would kind of be a win-win.
That'd be great, huh? Oh, well, no, it didn't work out. Although I did, I don't know if we mentioned on the air that there's somebody who's got a Pitfall 2 disc game on eBay that they're asking like, what, $150 or something for. It's kind of a ridiculous price. I've seen that for a while. I've been watching that one since like before last CoCo Fest. And the guy just isn't dropping the price. I even sent him a note at once. He said personal thing, or he's not going to drop the price or whatever. Who knows?
Wow.
But I did find an auction that had a different copy of Pitfall 2 in it. Not as nice, had a little rip in the cover. But it looks to be complete, and it included, Larry Bird's One-on-One, which I already have, but it also included Desert Rider, which I don't have. So, and then that one went for about $12. So a lot better deal to be had there, huh?
Yeah, I'd say.
So other than that, there is one little item I think we're going to talk about in the news. Is somebody's got a phone adapter or a phone. Well, it pretends to be a phone line for hooking up 2 modems together. Guys selling them on eBay. I bought one of those.
Well, that's cool.
But that's about all the CoCo related stuff I've picked up recently. Well, anyway, I think that's enough of a warm up. Everybody's ready to get on with the real show, so we'll be back in a moment with some announcements.
You are listening to the CoCo Crew Podcast with Neil Blanchard and John Linville. Like how I switched those names around? I'm the original gamer Stevie Stroh, and I'm a CoCo Nut. And if you're a CoCo Nut too, then visit I'mACoCoNut.com for all kinds of cool CoCo links, including my YouTube gaming videos. So visit I'mACoCoNut.com, and long live the CoCo. Back to you, Neil and John.
All right, well, let's move on with some announcements. We are the CoCo Crew, and we are available on Twitter as at CoCo Crew Podcast. That's CoCocrewPodcast. Listen to me spell. We are available on Facebook. We have a group called the CoCo Crew Podcast. We are, of course, available on iTunes. So if that is your preferred method for retrieving podcasts, we are available through there. We are also available through the streaming service Stitcher. There are at least 2 or 3 people in the world who make use of that for receiving our podcast. So if you're listening to us through Stitcher, hi. Maybe you could recommend us to a few friends. Again, we keep saying we're going to be available through Google Play and their podcast, but I still haven't seen that actually materialize. So I'm not really sure what's going on there. But maybe by the time some people get to this, they might be accessing us through Google Play. So if that's so, then welcome to the show. We are a member of the Throwback Network. The Throwback Network, of course, is a collection of retro-themed podcasts. These include technology-related podcasts as well as other retro-themed stuff, such as the Greatest American Hero and some other different podcasts, mostly along a retro theme. Along those lines, we are also listed on the Game by Game Podcast Information Hub. That is a collection of retro technology podcasts focused on different video game and computing systems, and including some arcade systems from the past. If you're looking for similar podcasts and you found us first, you may want to check those guys out. Audio for the CoCo Crew Podcast is hosted by Cyber Ears. If you have podcast hosting needs or other needs for hosting audio files on the internet, you should check out Cyber Ears, your audio on your terms. If you'd like to reach the CoCo Crew Podcast by email, or at least the CoCo Crew by email, we have some addresses available. You can reach us as a show, podcast at cococrew.org, feedback at cococrew.org. All of those will reach both Neil and I together. And of course, if you want to reach us separately, I'm available as John at cococrew.org. That's John. And Neil is available, of course, as Neil at cococrew.org. That's Neil at cococrew.org. That covers our sort of stock announcements. As we've done for the past few months, I've got a few more announcements covering retro computing events that listeners may be interested in attending or supporting. First one on the block here is the Vintage Computing Festival Southeast in 2016, which is April 2nd and 3rd of 2016. Like I said, traditionally these were numbered events, so 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. I think this should be 4.0. I still haven't seen any advertising from them of using that kind of nomenclature. So, I don't know. Maybe they're going to call it 4.0 or maybe they're not. But one way or another, it's their event in 2016, which will be held in Roswell, Georgia. Let's see, a week later, I'm still going to cover this Walsall Games Mart, which is actually across the pond in the UK, in a town called Walsall, which I've forgotten exactly where it is. I think, was it in the East Midlands or something like that? I believe that's correct. That's a gaming or retro gaming themed event. I think it's probably mostly a swap meet of some sort. But if you are in that area, you may want to check it out and see what kind of bargains are to be had. Moving on. So the Walsall Games Mart is April 9th of 2016. That same weekend, if instead of being in the UK, you happen to be in Brazil, particularly near Rio de Janeiro, there's, I'm going to try this with a Spanish-like pronunciation, even though, of course, it's Portuguese. But I believe it's the Segundo Encontro Club Color Rio. I'm sure that pronunciation is terrible, but it's the best I can do.
I think it sounded pretty good.
Anyway, it's the second the second event of its type. The boys in Brazil, so to speak, are the CoCo oriented folks down in Brazil are having their answer to CoCo Fest, having a gathering in Rio. Last time they got together, it looked like they had a good time and enjoyed each other's company quite a bit, and some good retro computing interaction. So if you are in Rio or nearby, I definitely would try to check it out. That is April 9th, 2016. Coming up after that, the week after that, of course, is the Vintage Computing Festival East 11, or XI. I guess the Super Bowl lost its Roman numerals, and the VCF East seems to have found them. Anyway, this event is located at the InfoAge Science Center in Wall, New Jersey. April 15th through 17th. That's 3 days, 2016. So the way they do their event, on Friday they have seminars or classes or whatever that are a little bit more in-depth technical for people that want to go to that sort of thing and learn how to repair their old teletype or how to clean, how to use retrobrite on dimming plastic or whatever. And then on the 16th and 17th, they have a more show-oriented thing with some talks of maybe of a less technical nature, or at least a more general interest nature. And then, of course, they have the computing show as part of it. It's a good event if you're in the New York or New Jersey area or that part of the United States. I highly recommend you get up to it. Of course, the week after that is the big event in the CoCo world, the one that we have tried to talk about so much that everyone would be nearly sick of it, but not so sick as to not come to it. Anyway, on April 23rd and 24th of 2016, of course, is the 25th annual that's with scare quotes or air quotes, the 25th annual last Chicago CoCo Fest, which is in Lombard, Illinois. I highly recommend this event. If you are listening to this podcast with any level of interest at all, you will probably enjoy going to CoCo Fest. It's a great event. Made a lot of good friends there. Enjoy the time. Enjoy the people. Enjoy the retro computing opportunities there. It's a great event. Come out. I hope to see everyone there. Okay, so finally, I've added one more on the end here, which is not in April. I think it's funny, right? We list 5 events. They're all in April. It's like it must be that time of year, It's just like, ooh, let's get together and do some retro computing. And it's April, spring is springtime. Ooh.
Yeah, I was just thinking you could take the whole month off of April and just retro right up.
Anyway, so in September 2016, September 10th and 11th will be the Vintage Computer Festival Midwest 11. And that also is being held in the Chicago area. And let's see, what is the name of that? It's held in Elk Grove Village, Illinois. So never was some talk of moving CoCo Fest out to the same site. It's a Holiday Inn at Elk Grove Village.
There was some talk of that. I was talking to Jason, who runs the event.
Yeah, so we almost, I think originally we followed the VCF Midwest folks to Lombard, to where we are now for CoCo Fest. And then they ended up, there was a little mix-up when that changed hands, and that's at the Heron Point Convention Center in Lombard, Illinois. That changed hands, and there was some talk, it became difficult to arrange some stuff, or at least maybe there was a temporal at the right time or something. Anyway, the VCF folks ended up moving out to this Elk Grove Village site, so that's where they are. But anyway, it seemed like a great bunch of guys as they've been joining us for CoCo Fest the past couple of years. At least one day or two, they'll come out and enjoy the auction and walk around and just come be compatriots with us. So I'd like to see their event be successful. I think Neil may have gone to this one last year. Is that correct, Neil?
I did. I went last year. It was really, I had a good time. I'm going to try to make it out there again this year.
Cool. So anyway, originally I'd added all these event announcements when I noticed they were all in April. It was kind of like a joke for me. But so I figured I'd be dropping them all after CoCo Fest, but at least this one, I think we'll keep this one around, and then we'll see what else shows up. Maybe there'll be more events over the year. So I think that covers our announcements for this month. I hope everyone's still enjoying the show, and we'll stay tuned through another little break.
Now, if there is any dedicated group of old computer users, it is certainly the people who still love their CoCo, the Tandy Color computer.
And now we're back with some news. We had tried to do the recording on a little bit shorter schedule this time because we've been feeling overwhelmed with news, and you guys still managed to push out a lot of extra news items. So we feel like the show is dominated by covering news stuff, but maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. What do you think, Neil?
Absolutely. And as we're recording this, love is in the air because it's Valentine's Day, and that's definitely CoCo.
Yeah, CoCo love. Lots of CoCo love to be had here, I think.
That's right.
All right. Well, the first item is we got an email about a month ago on the list from Boise. And so if it isn't clear to everyone, there's this project. This is about the pricing for cartridge case. So if it isn't clear to everyone, Boise and me, John Linville, and Mike Rowan went together to invest on producing injection molded cartridge cases for ROM pack style of cartridges for the CoCo. And so we are now trying to sell these. I, of course, wanted them mostly so that I could produce some games for production, but they're available if you want to do something. If you want to compete with me, so to speak, on that, I welcome the competition. I'm happy to have the opportunity to buy other people's games. If you want to compete with me, or if you want to do your own projects and put them in a cartridge case, if you want to produce hardware extensions to the CoCo that would fit inside a ROM pack size of case, this is your opportunity to get them. For the hardware guys, you might have to cut some holes or whatever in them, but still better than starting with nothing, I think. My opinion, these are nicer than 3D printed for most cases because they're just such a nice finish, and they're smooth and they're strong. And a lot of stuff you get that's 3D printed, if I squeeze it hard enough in my hands, it'll break. And it kind of has a rough corrugated kind of feel to the outside or whatever. Anyway, I'm not a fan of 3D printing. Maybe you can tell. It is handy to have 3D printing for certain things, but for something like this where you want to produce a lot of stuff that's going to all be the same size or whatever, I much prefer the injection molded stuff. I
was just going to say, not only are they factory and professionally looking, but they're ready to go. So if you're designing a game and you want to get 10, 20 copies out, even more than that, they're ready to roll. So you're not waiting for a 3D printer to churn through and make up different cases.
Yep. So anyway, Boise sent out the announcement for what the pricing is. Pricing is as follows. He's got quantity 1 to 24 for $15 a unit plus shipping. If you want to buy 25 to 99, that drops to $12 a unit. And if you want to buy $100 or more, it is $10 a unit. And if you contact Boise, it's coco@toughmac.com, he'll arrange for either he or Mike or myself to supply you with the cartridges. So anyway, that's what we got right now is the email. We might have we might get a website of some sort to handling that in the future. We're not there yet. Hey, we're CoCo guys, not DevOps people.
Lots of ways to get a hold of you guys if anybody wants.
It's pretty easy. And if you want to reach me or send to cococrew.org, I think if you can reach me that way, and that'll be good enough. I'll direct you appropriately. Anyway, so the Super Pack cartridge case is available. I think they're really nice, particularly if you want to make ROM cartridges. There's other things you might want to make. It might require a little work to be useful, but your mileage may vary on that. But if you want to build ROM cartridges, this is the way to go. All right. And I'm not biased at all.
And hey, hopefully this spawns more games.
Yes, it would be great to have more homebrew development in the CoCo community. So anyway, if you want to do that, if you want to build your own games or using these cartridges, you're probably going to want to make adhesive labels to stick on them. And in some cases, you may want to produce circuit boards to fit inside them. And so if you do that, of course, there's physical constraints involved with making that look right or whatever. And so wouldn't it be helpful to have mechanical drawings to help you with that? Those are available. I have put them out in a couple of ways. I think they're available through the Facebook page. The link in the show notes will take you to tandycoco.com topic for them. And I think I put them up on the multimedia FTP site as well. I'm not sure if they ever made it out of the incoming directory. There are templates there to help you size and position the label. And gives you the outlines of what circuit board would need to be able to fit into the case. And so there you have it.
What format are those the drawings in? Is it just is it a picture file, a PDF?
I think they're PDFs. So the template label is PDF. I think there's a zip file with the PCB mechanical drawings in there. I think that contains the PDF as well.
Oh, that's great.
Okay, so moving on to the next item. From Tony Capolini, he posts a design basic for the 8080 and 6800 from Microsoft. He posts a link to a PDF from the Living Computer Museum .org, which I guess that's Paul Allen's project, isn't it? Living Computer Museum. Anyway, it's a document that talks a bit about, it reads a bit more like maybe an early sales document, but it talks a bit about the design of the Microsoft basic interpreters for the 8080 and the 6800, and a little bit about performance differences and that sort of stuff. It even has some pricing information for back in the day if you wanted to buy them on paper tape or full-size single-density diskettes for CPM, that sort of thing. Anyway, it's kind of an interesting little look at the history of Microsoft Basic, so you might want to take a look. The link will be in the show notes. Moving up, so we have a link for Java for the TRS-80 CoCo. And you say, excuse me, what? So
I was just thinking the same thing.
So this fellow, I don't know him, Mike Cohn, Kohn or Kern. He's posted a project. Now, I'm not sure. I remember there was a project like this years ago that ended up spawning a little bit of a fight on the CoCo mailing list that I was involved with. But basically, it's a tool that takes Java bytecode and which is basically binaries produced by the Java compiler, and then sort of recompiles them for different processors. He's got a number of processors supported, but among those is the 6809 that's on the CoCo, and then maybe he's got some system library type stuff to support the graphics output on the CoCo and that sort of thing. He has a demo video, seems to show drawing a Mandelbrot set or something along those lines. It's doing some sort of graphics. It's got like a little bounce the ball around game or something. Now, if you're going to try to port your day trading application written in Java or whatever with modern web stuff in it, it's almost certainly not going to run. So this is where you get into the distinction of what exactly is Java. And Java's a language in and of itself. There's the bytecode that goes along with the language, and it runs on the Java virtual machine. And there's a lot of little bits called Java. In this case, you have something that is interpreting the bytecodes produced by the Java compiler, which means you might be able to use, there are other languages that produce Java bytecodes. You might be able to use those other languages to produce code that could run on the CoCo. But anyway, it's a neat little project, especially if you're a language geek, or especially a Java language geek. You might want to take a look at this. The link is in the show notes. So, any questions, Neil?
I was just say, I mean, even though it sounds a little basic, I mean, like you said, you're not going to run the high-end Java applets, but it's still going to add a lot of functionality to the CoCo.
Well, right. This is not really a tool, in my opinion, for running code that's been written for somewhere else, the way maybe a C compiler would be.
Right.
But this might be a cool tool if you really like writing code in Java and you really want to write something for the CoCo. This might be an interesting way to combine those two and produce something in Java for the CoCo.
Oh, that's great.
Anyway, so the next item, this is a link to the website for PC World, which of course is a paper magazine. I guess they still are a paper magazine. It used to be a paper magazine anyway. I don't know if they still are. But they have an article there. This old tech, TRS-80 MC10 micro color computer lives to play again. So we talked about the MC10 quite a bit in the previous episode, and because I was doing a retro challenge project with that. During that time frame, this article came out. This is from Benj Edwards, Benj Edwards. Who's not quite sure I don't think I know Benj that well, but I'm pretty sure I've seen his name associated with some retro stuff here and there. Anyway, so he does a little bit of a mini teardown on the MC10 and talks a bit about it. So particularly if you're an MC10 fan, or conversely, if you don't know much about the MC10 at all, you might be particularly interested in checking out this link in the show notes. Okay, so moving on. All right, we have an article or a post, I guess, and he titled it "Optimization Inside the Mind of a Madman." So Lee's been working on this game called Bouncy Ball that I think was maybe inspired by a modern game for like a phone or something. And he said he kind of hooked it a bit to Xmas Rush, saying that the ball was trying to retrieve Christmas trees that the snowmen had squirreled away in their hideout. But I guess he'd been writing maybe in BASIC. No, I guess he was writing it in C, right? He was writing it in CMOC. And wasn't getting quite the performance he wanted. And so he turned to Simon Jonason, who we've mentioned many times as someone who does a lot of demo-style coding for the CoCo, and asked him to help him do some optimization on his rendering routines. And he was able to take it from a 15 frame per second rendering in C, which I think that was even with the double speed poke, up to a 50 frame per second, which I think was even without the double speed poke in assembly. So that's pretty good performance. Anyway, he talks some about some of the optimizations they did, and he's got a lot of code examples and whatever. It's pretty thick on technical details, which some people will love and some people won't. But if you're the kind of person that loves that sort of thing, you probably want to check it out. What do you think, Neil?
It just goes to show the power of assembly. It's very optimized.
Well, it definitely can be. I mean, you can write crappy assembly code and really good C code, across at some point, but you definitely can get the exact job you want done in assembly, and quite often that leads to much better performance. Moving on. Okay, so a little bit of a negative note here. We see this once in a while in the color computer communities. And I'm not really sure what happens if people just get overwhelmed, maybe with things happening in their personal lives, and then the CoCo stuff maybe gets a little negative too, and it's just the easiest thing to drop or whatever. But so we get a note from Bill Pierce to the Color Computer group on Facebook. He says, "I bid you all farewell, ... Why?" And he complains about people making some sarcastic remarks about Nitrous 9 and VCC. I think both of those are things that Bill takes a personal interest in. He takes a couple of shots of his own, but then he basically says that he's leaving the Facebook group and he'll talk to you on the mailing list or something like that. I think it's maybe the first time I've seen somebody complain about the Facebook group and prefer the mailing list. I definitely have seen people say, I hate the mailing list and I'm going to go to the Facebook. I don't know. These things, we're all people. And people can be funny things sometimes. I think that's sort of where this falls, is that sometimes people get frustrated with each other and people don't always behave as nice as they should to each other. And then so sometimes their last resort is to kind of make a little bit of a scene about how they feel like people are being mistreated or whatever. And so we see this once in a while. I have since seen Bill. I don't think I've seen him on the Facebook group since then, but maybe I have. Definitely seen him in the mailing list. He's still part of the community. So hopefully things will work out. Maybe Bill will feel the love a little more. Maybe find his way back to Facebook once in a while. It's hard to say. The link is in the show notes if you want to see the discussion. I guess it's just airing a little dirty laundry. I find that that's often the best way to not let it build up, is to just discuss these things and get them out. So, Bill, I'm sorry you had a bad experience with the Facebook group. Like I said, I know people have had the opposite experience. Let's just all find the way to communicate that we like and stick with it and stick with each other, because we're the only crazy people out here.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm glad to see that Bill has not left the CoCo community. He's still on the mailing list, so that's great.
Yep, definitely. Okay, so what is the next item? Let's see. Oh, yes, the Ed Snyder has produced a clone of the ComputerWare composite video board for CoCo 2s. So this whole convert the video output to composite video is not a new thing. It goes way back, and Computerware had a board that would do that back in the past. That basically you pop out your 6847 video display generator and plug it into the board back in where the VDG had gone, and then you could tap the composite video off of there. And so Ed has produced a clone of that. Sounds like he might make that available. Hopefully that's in addition to the composite video solutions he's been offering. Sounds like this won't work with the CoCo 1 primarily because of just the mechanical, the shape of the board and the position of the VDG on the original motherboard. There's some, Ed has got the actual RCA connectors soldered down on the board, and there's some discussion about, well, what if you didn't have those and you just had a cable that you could run to the outside? I guess the RCA connectors are part of the interference problem. I don't know. We'll see, but it's nice to have as many options for composite video available as possible because some people like one thing and some people like another. What do you like, Neil?
That's true. Well, I've always been a fan of composites, so I'm looking forward to this. And as for the RCA cables, I mean, any analog source, if you get a good quality cable, I find it gets rid of most of the noise, if not all of it, on the screen. So yeah, should help that out.
All right, well, let's move on. So Paul Thayer has been working on a game that he calls Cave Hunter, which I think maybe has created some confusion with some other similarly named games or whatever. So at this point, it may be impossible to produce a new game with a completely new name that doesn't conflict at all with anything else. I don't know. But anyway, he's posted a video that shows the play of Cave Hunter, or at least the progress he's made so far. So if you want to check it out, you should check the link in the show notes. It's great to have new CoCo 3 games coming, and fun stuff to play. Just cool to have it out there. So Paul, great work, and I'm glad you're sharing the progress with us in ways we can take a look.
I remember when Paul posted the title screen of that game, I couldn't get over the graphics. I swear it looks 16-bit.
It does look pretty good. It makes good use of the CoCo 3's video capabilities. All right, well, moving on. So Brian White apparently has an obsession for the CGP 115, which if you're familiar or if you're not familiar, the CGP 115 was a fairly small, it's a plotter, which, is kind of like a printer, except it actually, instead of doing a scan, it's kind of like a plotter to a printer is kind of like the difference between a vector monitor and a raster monitor in a funny sense. So instead of just sending out a sequence of bits as you go across a line, like with a dot matrix printer, with a plotter, you say, here, go to this position, put the pin down, now move to this other position, pick the pin up, put a different pin down, move to this other position, that sort of thing. And so the CGP 115 used some they almost look like someone took the end of a ballpoint pen and just cut it off at a very short end. And so it used to be not too hard to find a few of these, but it's become quite a bit harder, I think, over the years. Plus, I guess there's a mechanical problem where there's some plastic gears that break and that sort of thing, so that the printer itself stops working. Anyway, Mr. White has produced a lot of information. He's got a Google Doc link, so we've linked to his post that contains this other link. That's available in the show notes. But to tell you how you can, is basically care and feeding for your aging CGP 115. So might help you repair it, can help you find replacement ink for your pens, or possibly can help you find replacement pens or whatever. I'm not sure what other information he has out there. But if you are enamored with the CGP 115, as I suspect Mr. White is, you probably want to go and check out his compiled research. What do you think, Neil? Do you like the CGP 115?
I do, actually. I think it's a neat little printer. It got a very small footprint as well.
It is small, so that's kind of cool.
I take it Radio Shack is not supporting the printer anymore. They don't have parts available.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to find parts at the Radio Shack for the CGP 115 anymore. hard enough to find a Radio Shack anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
All right. Anyway, moving on. The next item is that it's not clearly CoCo related, but I'll explain. So the Bug Book Computer Museum is moving to the Computer Museum of America. So basically, this is kind of like a merger announcement, is essentially what it amounts to. So Bug Book used to be there's one, and then maybe a collection of fairly technical hardware-related interfacing books available back in the late 70s, I guess. A lot of information at kind of at the chip level. I think it was a lot of it was sort of in the 8080 or Z80 world. Anyway, so it's neat that there's this retro related thing where there's a museum for this. That it looks like the fellow who's behind that was maybe getting a little older and wanted to ensure that the legacy of his collection lived on. And so we've got Lonnie Mims, who's running the Computer Museum of America down in Roswell, Georgia, which is related back to the VCF Southeast event. Anyway, he's apparently helping to take the benefit of that legacy, I guess, and promote it to the future. So that's great. That's not going to disappear. So that's good news. Well, why is it interesting for this podcast? Well, I noticed that along with, I guess, all this bug book stuff, we also had some actual computers that were part of the examples. And included in that is a Mark 8 computer. And, a Mark 8 computer made as an exact copy of the first Mark 8 made by John Titus, blah, blah, blah. This computer was made by Roy Justice. Roy was a student of mine at VT in the early 70s, blah, blah, blah. Right? So Roy Justice, if you don't know, is an old CoCo guy. He used to come to CoCo Fest quite a bit, and then he had some family illness and kind of stopped coming. I keep hoping to see him show up at another CoCo Fest. Roy, if you're out there, we miss you. We'd love to see you.
I'd like to meet Roy.
Yeah, he's a cool guy. He made the original CoCo 3 VGA adapters. We've talked about the newer RGB to VGA adapters that are coming out based on a design around an FPGA. But Roy had an adapter that I've always been happy with how it works, and that's been out a while. But anyway. So I threw this link in there because it mentioned Roy. And honestly, Roy, I miss you, dude. Come back to CoCo Fest. All right, so moving on to the next news item. So this is what I mentioned talking about eBay earlier on. No phone adapters for sale. And so basically, what we've got is somebody has taken it looks like it's designed to be a wall plug for two phone outlets like you'd put on the wall on your baseboard or whatever for the old style in-the-house phones. On the inside, instead of just hooking up to the normal phone wiring, he's put in a small little circuit that looks like a resistor and a capacitor and then leads for a 9-volt battery. And so the notion is that you can plug a 9-volt battery into this adapter, and it looks enough electrically. It looks enough like a what's called a POTS or plain old telephone system line, so that you can plug two modems into this box and then connect them, and then you can communicate over them as if they're, as if you've called CompuServe or something. How is this useful? Well, I mean, if you have so if you have two boxes that can communicate over serial lines, it doesn't take a great deal of technical skill to be able to hook the serial ports up together if they have plain serial ports. But sometimes you have systems where you don't have an exposed serial port, you just have a modem line. Maybe you do have exposed serial ports, but you just rather use the modem because you know how that works and you can plug two modems together or whatnot. So anyway, this is a way to make use of modems to connect two devices together without a lot of basically no technical building or whatever involved. You just plug the things together. You might need some special settings in your communications firmware or to tell your modems that you'd not expect a dial tone, for example, that sort of thing. But most systems, I think, will be able to handle that. Anyway, if you're looking for a way to hook two systems up using a modem, and you're not quite sure how to do it since you cut the cord to the bell station, this is your opportunity. This is from, I don't know the fellow's name, somebody called Milla V. Anyway, he does have them available on eBay, and they're fairly cheap. I think maybe $15 or $20, something like that. So you may want to think about getting one. It's the link to his website in the show notes.
I think that's a cool device to have. I mean, not only does it give modems a chance to be used again, but a lot of people don't have, the POTS phone system in their house anymore. The VoIP phones and cell phones, and it's kind of a thing of the past.
Yeah, but I don't know if there's still code. If you're, building, if you build a new place or whatever, do you need to put phone jacks in or whatever? I'm not sure, but a lot of places they're not hot, even if they are still there. So it won't really do you any good to plug them in.
That's true.
So anyway, it's a cool little thing, and maybe somebody can make a good use of it. Okay, another Brazilian link from the CP400 guys. This one is from Juliano Oliveira. I'm sorry, Juliano, but that's my best option or best attempt at pronouncing it. Anyway, it looks like what he's done, he's taken so in the microcontroller world, quite often, because microcontrollers have become a hobby, not unlike the old computers of the past, quite often you'll find electrical components that are kind of mounted out onto simple boards that are easier to connect things to for experimenting. And so that's sort of what this is. This is a thumbstick, similar to what you'd find on say, an Xbox controller or a PS4 controller or something. It's on a little board that's been built looks to me to be to make it easier to interface to say an Arduino or something like that. And so what he's done is taken that little board and run the wires out to a CoCo style joystick that he's plugged into his CP400, which uses the same kind of joysticks as the CoCo. And so he's got a little thumbstick that he can then play Zaxxon with. There presumably could play Farfall or whatever else too. So, it's just a cool little thing to do. Not the most complicated project ever, but it's something cool and it's something that people might be able to replicate if they speak Portuguese, or if they can get past the if they can make out the Google Translate, and they probably can figure out and replicate the project. So that'd be a cool thing, right?
Oh, definitely. Hey, it's another source for a joystick.
Oh, there you go. So very cool stuff. Thanks for sharing, Juliano. And see a lot of cool stuff come out of that Clube Color Brazil group on the Facebook. So if only I could pronounce it. All right. So here's another one. The next item. Seen a lot of retro news about this one. It might be a little bit of a publicity stunt on the top of this Usborne children's books, which I think maybe they have more of a UK presence. I'm not really sure. But so I guess they've got a couple of new computer books oriented towards children. The Lift the Flap Computers and Coding book, and Coding for Beginners using Scratch. Scratch, of course, is a programming environment designed for children. And so they've got a couple of those for sale. And then as part of that, they have taken some similarly themed books from the 80s, and they've made those available for free download. And there's a lot of them. So they've got Programming Tricks and Skills, Machine Code for Beginners, Introduction to Computer Programming, Basic for Beginners, Practical Things to Do with a Microcomputer. They've got a bunch that are like games, like computer battle games, computer space games, probably a dozen, give or take, maybe a little more, books available now that you can download free of charge, PDF, I guess. Actually, I'm not sure what the format is. It might be EPUB or something like that, but you can get them for free. If that sounds interesting to you, there's a link in the show notes, and you should download them and take a read. What do you think, Neil? You going to be downloading these books?
I'll check it out. Sounds a good resource for sure.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think they were UK based, so they might focus a bit more heavily on the Spectrum and maybe some other systems that were more popular over there. Some of it's generic. And anyway, so here's another one from Bill Pierce. Like I said, had a a news item from him earlier where he's a bit upset with the Facebook group, but now he's still posting to the mailing list, so still have him in the community, so that's great. He's got another M-Shell update. It seems like we've had M-Shell updates featured in the news items for a couple of releases now, so I guess he's pretty active on this M-Shell stuff. I don't really use it. I don't know a lot about it. I think it's like a file manager. It seems to get good press from other people. So I'm glad to see that it's being updated. Do you use M-Shell, Neil?
No, I keep meaning to. I got to get an OS 9 system back up and running.
Yeah.
And it's been a while. It seems like a kind of a GUI interface, is it not?
I think it is. I don't know if it's really GUI or more what like some people might call TUI, which is a text user interface, where it's
right.
Positional text or something like that. But I'm not really sure. I don't know. Haven't used it.
It sounds like it makes OS 9 a lot easier to use, so if somebody's not as savvy with it.
Yeah, it sounds like that's a thing that a lot of people complain about OS 9, so it might be a great thing to check out. Anyway, moving on. All right, so here's 2 in a row from Glenn Vandenbigler, who runs the CoCo Lounge. And so you'll see why there's 2 in a row in a minute, because they're blog posts, and the first one says, frozen assets, rent, new digs, and winding down the CoCo Lounge store. Glenn's had some problems with his landlord, I guess, or in the space that he's living in, and he's had a lot of tales of woe in his blogs for a while. And so he posts this, and couldn't help but think that he was sort of giving kiss goodbye on the CoCo stuff. And so I'd originally included this because, and then like the next day, he posted the next link, which was, no, the lounge is moving, not closing. So
a big difference there.
Yeah, it is a big difference. So I guess he's moving house. He's going to have more room there, but he doesn't want to move everything. So he's maybe trying to sell some stuff off and not collect new CoCo stuff for a while. But I think he still intends to sell some CoCo stuff along the way, and especially once he gets into the new place. So there you go. Particularly if you saw the first one and not the second one, now you should know that Glenn's store is still going to be there, and that's the news. He might be a little slow on some stuff, and there might be some sales along the way.
And it's definitely reassuring if anybody put a deposit on a waiting list, like say for a CoCo 3, or I know he's got a waiting list for certain products.
Yeah, that's definitely true. So good news there. Okay. Moving on. So the Retro Challenge. We mentioned the Retro Challenge last week. I was a participant. I pointed out that we had a number of CoCo people involved this time around. Team CoCo, I called them. So it's a good event. Now we have the winners. I unfortunately am not among them, but like you say, it's Retro Challenge is kind of like global thermonuclear war. The only winning move is not to play, or something like that. Anyway, along those lines, so 2 of the 4 named winners are part of Team CoCo. So we've got Brett Gordon, who had his networked artillery style game, which I think he actually called global thermonuclear. So it is a neat project. He used the DriveWire server's networking capabilities to communicate through an IRC server. IRC, Internet Relay Chat, it's a protocol that's used for people to actually just talk to each other on the internet. But his games talk over this networking stuff through an IRC server to coordinate who hit what and who did what damage and that sort of thing. So pretty cool stuff. Congratulations to Brett being named one of the winners. Another one of the 4 winners. So 2 of the 4 winners are CoCo people. This one being Jim Gary. We mentioned Jim a lot on the podcast. He does a lot of cool basic work, basic as in the language. He does a lot of porting between the MC10 and the CoCo, or between other systems and either the MC10 or the CoCo, and then usually from one to the other. So it's cool. Jim's got listed as one of the winners this time. And I don't think it was a particular one of his games. I think it was just his entire effort, because he's very prolific and produces a lot of games. So very cool stuff. Congratulations to Brett and Jim, and of course to Tom Radna and Masswork. I'm not sure who that is. Actually, Masswork, he did some stuff related to the Kyocera laptop style machines, of which includes the Model 100, Model 102. So it was a very Tandy retro challenge this time in a number of ways.
Sounds great.
But anyway, so that's it. The retro challenge event was over for January. Previously, the next event would have been in July, but they're moving to a different schedule, and so I think the next event now is going to be in October, and then followed in April and October of 2017, and on from there. Anyway, so congratulations all. Okay, next item. So CGA to VGA video converter kit. So this is from MicroB Technology. So I guess the MicroB was a retro computer from back in the 80s. I think Z80 based. It seems to have been centered in the southern hemisphere, I guess, around Australia. There was some effort to produce a reproduction MicroB, I guess, last year or two, and that group, partly, I guess, to help fund itself, also produced this video scaler adapter or whatever. I think it's a circuit that plugs into a kind of off-the-shelf video scaler board called the GBS 8200. Anyway, I mention it because not only does it support their MicroB, but it also supports a number of machines, including the Amiga and the Tandy CoCo 3. And they even will sell you a pre-made cable for the CoCo 3. So in that sense, it's a CoCo 3 product. It sells for about $95. I guess those are Australian dollars. Not really sure where those fall into the U.S.-Canadian spectrum, but so roughly $100, you could get an adapter that would be comparable to the RGB to VGA adapters that we've mentioned before, or even comparable to Roy's adapter, I guess. Have you ever tried one of these, have you, Neil?
No, I haven't, but I was checking it out, and it's kind of neat that it's a dual purpose. So if you do have an Amiga or a platform that supports it.
Yeah, it's always nice to have systems that support more than one machine. Okay, so moving on. Darren Atkinson, a few months back, had a project. I think we mentioned it I saw it in the show notes for one of our earlier episodes. So I know we mentioned it, called the MC11. And so basically what that was a project inspired by, I guess, by the MC10. Yeah, I guess the 68HC11, which is a later processor in that microcontroller line from Motorola. So basically it produces a system similar to the MC10 based around a 68HC11. I guess Kip Kuhn sent something to the mailing list saying, "Hey, Darren, what about that MC11 project? How's that going?" And so then unfortunately Darren replied with, he says, "The Magic 8-Ball says, outlook not so good." So not a lot of details there, but it sounds like that project has maybe fallen by the wayside. So if you're waiting for a 68HC11 based MC10, you better either start designing it yourself or give it up. So sorry to hear that.
In case anybody's wondering, Darren Atkinson is the guy behind the CoCo STC.
Yep, that's true. He's also behind the MCX 128. He actually also designed a floppy controller for the MC10 that I think a couple of people have produced.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah. So Darren's a neat guy. Done some cool designs. Anyway, looks like the MC11 is not going to be one of them, at least not anytime soon. All right, moving on. Chris Martin. I have finally finished my BMP to SemiGraphics 24 mode converter. Of course, SemiGraphics 24 is one of those video modes that the CoCo can do, CoCo 1 and 2, or the Dragon can do. It arises out of the combination of the 6847 video display generator and the 6883 SAM. And it gives you a 64 pixel wide by 192 lines tall image in 9 colors. So the red, green, yellow, blue, buff, cyan, magenta, orange, and black, and with a few restrictions on placement of colors. I think we've documented that elsewhere. Anyway, Chris has produced a converter. It looks like he's getting pretty good results with some pictures, and kind of depends on your expectations, I guess. I always think I have done some similar projects, and I always think, oh, wow, that looks really good. And I bring my wife in and say, what do you think of that? And I say, well, keep trying. It'll get better. They look pretty good to me. My wife or kids might not be as impressed. I don't know if Chris is in that same boat or not.
I think they look good to us because, we know the hardware limitations, right? So we know what to expect from the machine.
That's right. So
Yeah.
anyway, it's always cool to see somebody messing around. It's not a game, but it's kind of like a utility you could do. That's one thing, even if it's not a game, if you can show some pictures on your CoCo, that sometimes will answer those annoying friends or relatives and say, yeah, but what do you do with it? So, well, I put up pictures on it to entertain myself. That seems to satisfy people asking questions. So,
Yeah. It didn't hurt the pictures that Chris was using, too, to demo the program.
some of them were hot chicks, right?
Yeah, a lot of
So-
80s, 80s babes.
and some 80s stuff too. That's right.
Yeah.
He actually has made his converter available. I think, so if you look through the links in the show notes, I think you might be able to find the converter. I'm not sure if he's got his own player or if he's just using the display program from Robert Galt's converter that's been around for a while. Anyway, so there you go. If you want to show some pictures on your CoCo in as many colors as the CoCo can show without special tricks, at least, here's an option for you. All right, next item. Okay, Popstar Pilot Blog, Chapter 24, from our friend Nick Morentis. So Nick has been working on this CoCo 3 game for a while, and he's done some cool stuff. He's got a few tricks here and there for status board on the screen and for doing some background tricks and raster bars or whatever. He did post an update showing he's got a video that shows some gameplay and you just go around and shoot these balloons and you get some sound effects. It's pretty cool. We're still waiting to see the actual game release. Hey, it looks cool. I'm going to defer to Neil as our game reviewer as to how things look like they're coming along, but it looks pretty good to me. What do you think, Neil?
Oh, it looks great, and I do respect he's taking his time with this game too, putting all the little polishes on it, finishing touches. I'm really looking forward to it, and you can definitely count on a review on it when it's done, because I will be doing a Games Corner review on it for sure.
Awesome. Okay, so our next two items actually both come from John Strong. And so John posted a picture on the CoCo, the TRS-80 color computer Facebook. First game arrived yesterday. And so some of us had already heard of John's Bomb Squad game. Maybe some others hadn't. So in the replies to that, he posted some screenshots of the game in action. Strongly appears to be a Minesweeper style of game, certainly inspired by Minesweeper. Hopefully that is getting closer to reality. John is collecting parts, and so hopefully that means he's going to be building some boards. It sounds like he thinks he's going to, or he's intending to 3D print some cases. So he's rejecting our injection molded cases, but which is fine if he likes that solution, and more power to him.
It sounds like he has a reason to that, though. There's a method to his madness. I just don't know what it is.
Yeah. He said something about there's things you can't do with the injection molded cases or something like that. We'll see. Maybe he's going to do something special, put LEDs on the case or something like that. Anyway, so be looking for a Minesweeper style game called Bomb Squad from John Strong. Hopefully that'll show up at CoCo Fest, if not before. Okay, so the next item also from John Strong. Like I said, John Strong has been doing some 3D printing for a while, and he's been doing 3D printed cases for the CoCo SDC. So there's another item, which oddly enough is also from Darren Atkinson, that's out in the wild that it's typically been just released as a bare board, or not a bare board, but a populated board, but not enclosed. So John is working on an enclosure for the MCX 128, which is the memory expansion for the MC10. I think we just mentioned it. It looks like there'll be options for putting clothing on your MC10 expansion there, your MCX 128. Looks pretty good to me. I think we had a news item last time where someone, was Jim Geary, I think, had put some clothes on his using a sensor from an alarm company or something. So maybe you'll have to resort to that. So very cool, huh?
While we're talking about John Strong, I just want to thank him for sending me a really cool birthday gift. The night of my birthday, I got a random email, and it just said, flash and enjoy. So it's like, well, I had curiosity got the best of me, so I had to flash what he sent me. So I put it in the little mini flash from Cloud9, and he wrote me a little birthday game.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was a breakout style game, 3 levels, and it said first level was happy, the next level was birthday, the third level was Neil.
Well, now I'm jealous. John, if you're listening, my birthday is in November, but I'll be happy to accept a half birthday gift in May. May 19th would be. So we'll see what happens, huh? How about that? Very cool. All right, so moving on. This link, I think the link here is the one that I took from Daniel Campos posting to the Color Computer group. I did have the original Globo Color Brazil link with the Google Translate, but thankfully Daniel has done a little more, a better English translation than that. So I included Daniel's link here instead. But so I guess Victor Trucco, I'm not sure the pronunciation. So Victor, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. So Victor Trucco has produced something that he calls the Expander Multipack Dash capital B, capital R Extended Plus Blue, which is quite the name. But anyway, basically what it is a multi-pack style of expansion cartridge or backplane, specifically designed to fit the slot of the CP400, which has some mechanical differences from the CoCo or the Dragon, but electrically is the same. So once that's solved, it should fit into CoCos and Dragons as well if you manage to acquire one. But so anyway, see a lot of people clamoring for a multi-pack on the list from time to time. I think most of them don't really know what they're wishing for. It's more of they may not be quite as great as you think they are, but they can be useful. And so anyway, they're apparently are a little hard to find on eBay. Sounds like there's a couple of replacement options that are in the works, and this is one of them. So Victor, very cool. Glad to see it. I hope to see them soon, and I hope you'll make them available outside of Brazil, and I'm sure you'll be able to sell them. So very cool stuff. All right, so link in the show notes if you want to check that out. All right, moving on. This is a post to the mailing list from Robert Galt. Robert, of course, has been around a long time, sort of our benevolent sage of the group or whatever. So he posts something: printing from CoCo 3 Disk Basic to the DriveWire 4 printer. Well, that sounds cool. So what's up with that? Well, so DriveWire, of course, it really started as more of a Nitrous 9 based project, but it doesn't really care what it's talking to on the other end. It just sort of was developed with DriveWire, with the Nitrous 9's drivers in mind. And amongst those includes a printer driver for Nitrous 9, and you can send stuff through the DriveWire port out to the printer, which actually it emulates, I guess, certain kind of printers. I guess an Epson printer, and does it have a Radio Shack printer option available as well? I think so. It did, at least at one point. Maybe it doesn't now. Anyway, you can send out to sort of an emulated printer that I guess it turns it into PostScript or something on your PC. And so that way you can use a printer from your, in that case, from your iOS 9 applications. But in this case now, you can also, with this little piece of code provided by Mr. Galt, you can use the similar capabilities from your basic programs. And I guess he's tested it using HDB-DOS and the list command. But my guess is, at least it seems to be intended, that any kind of print number -2 will work. So there you go. If you have a basic program that wants to print. Now, it probably does not transfer off to, disk basic based machine language programs. They'll be trying to bit bang on the actual printer port, and that's not going to transfer over to DriveWire. But if you have stuff written in BASIC to do that, it looks like it should work. So very cool. Very exciting to see that. What do you think, Neil?
I could see that being very handy for even writing a small BASIC program to print directory trees.
Yep, that can be very helpful, especially since they just scroll past on the CoCo screen. All right, well, very awesome. Okay, so this was going to be the last item since it's pretty news. Then I think we have one more that came in today. This is from Tim Lindner. I guess Tim works in a print shop of some sort. That Sounds familiar. I might be making that up. But anyway, he certainly seems to have some amount of printing expertise. And he has produced a reproduction program pack box. For those not familiar, the program packs, the cartridges that plug into the CoCo, originally they came from Radio Shack in these gray square folded paper boxes. And they tuck in there along with the instruction manual, and all the boxes look the same. They weren't particularly sturdy, and so usually if you find one now, they're kind of beat up and often torn or whatever. So I guess this is a reproduction of those, partly as a way to rebox the games in your collection. I suppose if you want to produce new games, new cartridges, our cartridges will fit in the box, I expect. They certainly will fit in the old boxes, so I expect they would fit in the new boxes. So that might be an option. Anyway, it's a cool reproduction thing. Some collectors will probably appreciate, so way to go, Tim. Good job. Okay, so our final item, I snagged this today on Google Plus. I don't know a lot about it. I'm not even sure if it really works. And I don't really know who this person is. It's JML at FRIJID.net. I had trouble finding a name on that, so I'm not really sure who the person is. But he appears to have taken the Madness in the Minotaur game. He seems to have disassembled the 6809 code, and he actually has a Git repository available for that. So Git is a source code control system for writing computer programs. And then he has a Git repository for an x86 version. And so what appears to have happened is he seems to have taken the 6809 Madness and the Minotaur, disassembled it to some sort of workable source, and then converted the source code to x86 assembly, and then rebuilt it. And he seems to have links for Linux and BSD, and Solaris and OS X and even Windows. So, like I said, I just saw this come in today, snagged it for the news item. I may be misinterpreting this, but it looks like cool stuff, so I wanted to get it in. If you know more about it, please let us know. Send us some feedback. But anyway, there you go. Links in the show notes. And so with that covers our news for this month. And seems like plenty to me. What do you think, Neil?
Yeah, got a lot of news this month.
Definitely. All right. Well, we're going to take a little break, and then we'll be back with some feedback.
Hey, John and Neil, Original Gamer, and I wanted to chime in on your topic of homebrew games. I would like to say that I absolutely support this idea. I'm excited that there are still projects. I'm excited about things like Sockmasters, Donkey Kong, Farfall, Christmas Rush, just to name a few. And I would like to go on record to say that I have no problem paying for both digital and physical copies of these games. And I think there's probably two different markets. There's probably the casual gamer who would just like to have them. And then there's the diehard fan who wants to have the nostalgic cartridge. And I think that you could probably appeal to both of those markets. And my suggestion would be for the digital distribution is to make sure your game references your website prominently in the game and let people go there on an honor system and just hit a PayPal link and let them pay for the game as they see fit. And I don't think anywhere between $1 to $5 is an unreasonable amount to pay for a digital copy. We pay that price for apps on our phones, and so why wouldn't we pay for that for our CoCo? And then there is the hardcore, diehard, special kind of crazy person like myself who would love to have a cartridge, and I think anywhere between $40 to $60 is absolutely a fair price to pay for that cartridge. Not to mention the value of the time that went into creating the game, but just what it takes to actually produce this, and the people who make it should be compensated, and I don't think that's an unreasonable price, and hopefully I'm not alone on this opinion.
Okay, so we did get a little bit of feedback this month, so I thought we'd cover that. First item comes from Mr. Curtis Boyle, and this is in response to a question about shareware in the CoCo world in the last episode. He says there was shareware in the CoCo world. I remember programs on Delphi/CompuServe being shareware, parentheses. I even did a few utilities that way for OS9/Nitrous 9, close parentheses. It has never really taken off in the CoCo world, though. If I remember correctly, Nick Marentis released Cosmic Ambush as shareware, and only a couple of people ever contributed any money for it. I know my CC Unzip program got one shareware. So there's your answer. There was some shareware, or at least some attempts at shareware, but for whatever reason, never a big hit. I'm not sure. I kind of wonder how much money anyone ever made off of shareware on any platform. There probably were a few that did, but I think shareware payments are kind of like teenage sex, where lots of people talked about it, and most people didn't really do it, that sort of thing. Anyway, so moving on, I had a question in the last episode. We were talking about the MC10, and it's like the MC10 doesn't have a csavem command, although it does have cloadem and exec, so you can load machine language binaries, but you can't save them. And I thought that sounded pretty strange. So William Astle points out, it says, it turns out that plain color basic on the CoCo doesn't have csavem either. It's added by extended basic. And so the micro color basic on the MC10 is basically, it's essentially just plain color basic, although it does have some bits that were added on the CoCo by extended basic, some functions and such. But you're basically essentially talking about color basic on the MC10, not extended basic. And so whether or not it makes any sense, that at least accounts for why csavem wasn't part of the package. It probably was not intentionally left out so much as just not included.
At least that wraps up, makes some sense out of it, at least.
It makes a little sense. It still seems like a questionable decision, but I guess you can see where you might drop it from something that's supposed to be a client-style device, which was probably the idea for non-extended basic.
And then you always wonder if that command was there, would there have been more support for the machine? I mean,
on the MC10, it probably would have made a bigger difference. I'm not sure. So here's one that it's a Steve Strobridge. Trying to be kind, but I know he's complaining about me. Said the MC10 segment has given an idea to my suggestion of breaking your text segments into smaller pieces. Neil will testify that I always say, oh yeah, this time the text segment's going to be short. It'd probably be 15 or 20 minutes. And then by the time I get back to him, I said, well, sorry, this time it's 55 minutes. Something like that. It's just, it's hard to cover. It's hard to cover topics and cover them reasonably in a shorter period of time, and also avoid talking so fast that no one understands them. So we'll see. I don't think that there would have been a lot of patience for 2 or 3 episodes worth of MC10 technical discussion. I could be wrong. The MC10, I basically wanted to cover it all in one episode, and so it ended up a little longer maybe than I would have liked, but it is what it is. If there's some people who want to absorb it and maybe just need more time, I think probably what you have more is either people who are happy to have the segments, and some people who would prefer not to have the segments. And so I'm glad you enjoy them. If you don't want the segments, well, I just have to refer you to the fast forward option on your MP3 player. But Steve, now I understand not everybody. It's hard to hit the right medium for those segments. I'm trying to feel my way through. We'll see how I do this time, talking about the RS-232 pack. But we'll see. I haven't recorded that yet as I'm recording this. What do you think, Neil? Do you think I should extend the technical segments, make them take longer, more episodes, that sort of thing? Or do you think we're hitting it about right?
I think we're hitting about right. I mean, it depends what the topic is, but with the MC10, it makes sense. What you were trying to do is, get it done in one show. Yeah. It's not really as a popular machine as the CoCo, right? So
yeah, I mean, the CoCo-based segments lasted about 7 episodes, so you could have dragged that out a little further, but it's hard to imagine how much farther you could go. So,
yeah, and there was a lot to cover there too. So
yeah. Anyway, so our final feedback item comes from Roland Schweiger. Rollo, I've heard his name mentioned on the Vectrix podcast and maybe some others. So Rollo gets around a little bit. So we know you're cheating on us, Rollo, but we'll welcome you back anyway.
He still knows a good processor.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway. Rollo says, talking about things people should bring along for CoCo Fest, you forgot the most important of all. They need to bring their Dragon/CoCo multi-cartridges with a smiley face there. So, of course, Rollo is selling multi-cartridges, and I think we've mentioned those on the podcast before. You can find them at the World of Dragon archive.org, or is archive.worldofdragon.org. I think that's it. So, yeah, you definitely should go check those out, and so give Rollo the free plug there. I think every episode I talk a lot, Neil talks some. We're bound to have some stuff we either misspeak or leave out or whatever. Let us know what we're saying, what else you'd like us to talk about, suggestions for other shows. Feel free to record your own audio feedback. We haven't gotten any of those yet. I'd love to get one. Or, like I said, send us an email or contact us on the Facebook group, whatever. We are happy to have the feedback. Like I said, we do the shows for the audience, so we love to hear from the audience to know that they're listening to the shows. So let us hear from you. And again, that's feedback at CoCoCrew.org or John at CoCoCrew.org or Neil at CoCoCrew.org. And, let us hear from you.
Okay, but why Tandy computers? In a word, quality. We do it all, from custom-designed semiconductors to the finished product. Tandy business computers are manufactured in our own USA plants. We test and retest and test again to ensure one of the highest standards of quality in the industry. And Radio Shack provides total service and support. I'm convinced.
Tandy Computers at Radio Shack Computer Centers. In business, for business.
All right. We are going to continue what has become our new tradition of having a host discussion topic. These can be fun little debates. Sometimes maybe we should just include the debate over the host discussion topic in as a segment of the show. But this time, I think what we've settled on is what I've got in the show notes, or at least right now, is a topic listed as "What about printers?" as a question mark. And so what I mean by that is, printers obviously are part of the retro landscape. They're interesting old machines, most of which have essentially zero value, almost a negative value, in the sense that people are probably on that verge of paying you to take it if they have an old printer laying around. And so the question is, should you take it? What will you do with it? What good is it? Are they worth preserving? All that sort of thing. I probably have a little bit to add there, but I think I've talked enough for now. I'm going to let Neil give you some thoughts on what he thinks about printers. So what do you think, Neil?
Well, I've definitely always liked old printers, and I'm going to be honest with everybody here. I've lusted over a CGP 220 for the longest time. I used to have one when I was back in the day with my first CoCo setup. That was a printer I used, mainly that, and I had a DMP 105 for doing black and white copies of things. And the problem I find with old printers is you can't find ink or ribbons for a lot of them now. And I think that's probably does hurt the value somewhat of these printers you see on eBay or, at flea markets and so on.
Yeah, that is definitely one of the biggest problems, I think, with old printers is, you just can't, like the dot matrix ones, you basically can't find the ribbons at all. Like I got a DMP 100 not that long ago, maybe a year ago, which was completely out of nostalgia because that's what I had as a kid. And you just can't find ribbons for that at all. And I've tried, there were similar printers in terms of they were the same mechanism sold and packaged for the Commodores and some other machines. And so I've tried tracking those down and looking for printers for ribbons based on those, because even though they're not quite the same in terms of software, they use the same mechanisms and the same ribbons and stuff. And, on those, I did track down some that claimed to be compatible, and then they turned out to be completely different. So I don't know what the deal was. It might be the ribbon itself might be compatible. Cut it and take it off the spools and replace it. That might work, but in terms of the mechanism, that wasn't going to work. You mentioned a CGP 220. That seemed like a cool printer back in the day. Could definitely produce some pretty output. You could find some refill ink stuff there. I'm not sure how well any of that worked. I know the printer cartridges kind of had sort of a rubber seal that had to be pierced with like a hypodermic needle. By now, that rubber is so old, I don't know if that would even withstand being pierced without just tearing right off.
Yes,
So
it's true. And I even tried. I went as far as taking those cartridges to ink refill places in town here, and you should see the strange looks I got.
Oh yeah, they didn't want to mess with them.
Oh, they had no idea.
A lot of times those kind of places are not be as technical as you think they are. They're more kind of a plug and play, what they can get out of the new catalog sort of thing, but not necessarily good on actual engineering solutions.
Right. Yeah, I learned that.
So there is there's a printer on eBay right now that's called the Okadata Okamate 20 color printer. And I did a little research on this. And so I guess this printer was available with that name, but specific for a number of machines. And I guess it actually had kind of a module that plugged in and out for the interface. And so they'd have specific cabling or whatever for different machines, like the VIC-20 or Apple II or whatever. This one is for the TRS-80 micro color computer, which of course means it has a serial cable, and so should plug into the CoCo as well. If you have the software to drive it, I don't know. It doesn't seem to include a manual. But I did look around, and this printer uses a technology called thermal wax transfer, which is a bit different from most, printers. It's not an inkjet or whatever. It's literally melting wax onto the paper, kind of like melting crayons onto your paper.
Well, that sounds
and
cool.
I did find a source, I think, that claimed to be it, and I can't vouch for it because, of course, I didn't buy it. But occasionally you can find sort of interesting technology like that. You might be able to find ribbons or whatever you call that for that that sort of machine. But I don't know. I guess the real question is, what use is it? What are you going to do with it, with a printer like that? Are you going to hook it to the CoCo? Or are you going to hook it to a modern machine? Or are you going to just set it over in the corner to help it hold down papers when the wind blows?
See, for myself, I would like to use a printer on the CoCo, and one of its kind, like a one that works natively.
Yeah. So you're going to draw pictures or something, or?
Well, you print spreadsheets. You can do word processing.
Yeah.
It's possible.
Would you any word processing on the CoCo these days?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would like to try to do some spreadsheets on it. I think that'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, well, kind of cool. It's sort of that starts to fall in the category of writing software on the CoCo with old tools kind of thing, where it's like, well, that's neat, but I probably wouldn't do it because there's just better tools for the jobs these days.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think it's just always the part of trying to find another use to use an old computer, right?
Yeah. Well, so, what about kind of alternative uses? So like you see these people, you see on YouTube where people will take an old dot matrix printer or something, and they'll run it backwards and forwards and whatever so that you can make music with them. Can you imagine doing something like that?
I saw that. That's pretty interesting. It's like what a lot of people do with the floppy drives.
Yeah, you can do that too. But I don't know. I don't know how much money that's worth and how much printer space that's worth to do that.
Yeah, hearing the Doom theme song playing off of a dot matrix printer.
It would be hilarious. Yeah, I don't know. I'd like to see somebody do that and bring it to CoCo Fest. Hint, hint. Yeah, so I don't know. I have thought, if you run any kind of computer infrastructure that's around your house, whether it's home automation or if you have some kind of web-facing service, you're selling books out of your basement or something like that, you could use an old dot matrix printer as for logging or something like that. It makes some sense. I think dot matrix printers are still probably the cheapest form of printing, which is why they still use them at the airports.
They're great for a carbon copy too.
Yeah, they work for carbon copy. I did buy recently a couple of rolls of thermal printer paper P10. I found that Glenn VDB was selling, so those arrived and they look usable. I haven't actually put them into the TP10 yet, but I thought that might make for a nice project. That might be a cool project. Would be if you had some sort of image capture or whatever, or just a printer, just a picture you could load onto the CoCo and then drive the printer with it. And there's probably software already to do that, but if you wanted to write your own, it might be a cool thing to do. course, that one's not color, but you could do that on the CGP 220. I have thought that, we're talking about the TP or the CGP 115 earlier, which is a plotter. I have always thought that those would be cool to do something with. Either that one or there's the big flatbed plotters from Tandy that you see pop up on eBay once in a while. Although I bet those are impossible to find plotter pins for. The DL logo that's available for OS 9.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently it supports writing plug-in modules for outputting, for controlling the codes, or for when you write your logo stuff, and it'll design for like driving little turtle robots or whatever. But I've always thought it might be a cool thing to hook that up to like a plotter. And so you could write your logo program and then hook up your CGP 115 and see the plot output that way. So there's a cool project for somebody to do.
Yeah, that sounds good. You mentioned the TP10. I've always been impressed with that printer as well. Have you ever hooked that up to your CoCo?
I'm not sure I've ever had it hooked up.
It's a neat little printer.
Yeah. You ever do anything with yours?
No, I don't have one.
Oh, no?
Not a TP10. Every time I see one come up on eBay, I get the itch to put a bid in. But
well, yeah, so I guess the jury is sort of still out then on the printers. It's like, well, you can do some cool stuff with them. The usefulness probably ranks slightly below that of a floppy drive, unless you're pressing them into some sort of unusual use, like as a logging printer or something like that.
Right.
It could be fun to do something with some of them, depending on what your definition of fun is. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, but the roadblock is you got to find the ink for them.
Have you ever tried to re-ink a printer ribbon?
I looked into it, and I might go down that avenue. I picked up a DMP 105 off of Boise Pete, actually, and it's an excellent shape. He had me at the dust cover, and it came with that, so I bought it off him, and then I didn't realize, I wasn't thinking it through, that, hey, wait a second, I can't get ribbons for this thing. So yeah. Online, some people are talking about you can take the cartridge apart and actually get a ribbon from another printer and wind it in.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking that's a messy job.
It probably is messy. I don't know. It might be the best option. It's probably no messier than trying to take the ribbon and slide it through an ink pad or something like that.
Yeah.
I've heard that you can take WD-40 and spray it on the dried up ribbons and get some use out of them that way.
Yeah, I heard that too. I'm leery though.
It sounds a little messy and not super high quality printing to me, but
right.
I guess if you were worried about super high quality printing, you probably wouldn't be using a 30-year-old printer anyway.
And then the other problem is you have the opposite effect. If you want to use a new printer on a CoCo, it just doesn't have the power to drive it.
Yeah, that can be a problem. I think it kind of depends. If you get some of the higher end printers, they can accept PCL or PostScript. CoCo probably can't generate much PostScript, but I think you can generate PCL in some cases. Mm-hmm. And PCL, I think, defaults to taking plain text as well. So if you have a printer in PCL mode and just send it plain text, it ought to print it.
That's good to know.
I'm not 100% sure there, but I think so. And so then you still have the thing of how do you get it there? It used to be you could buy them, and they'd at least the modern printers would at least have an old style Centronics parallel port on them,
right?
Which you could get the serial to parallel adapters like the Blue Streak or whatever for the CoCo.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, the new printers don't even have those. So I'm not sure what you do in that case. I think you'd have to, at that point, break down to having some kind of modern machine as a go-between, maybe a Raspberry Pi or maybe just your regular PC running DriveWire or something like that.
Which is kind of where we are today then, like Robert Galt's printing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's probably it then. I'm not sure what else to say about the what about printers. What about printers? So, well, I guess it depends. Sort of the answer there, right?
Another cool fact with the CGP 220 is I just recently learned, was it last year at CoCo Fest or maybe the year before CoCo Fest when me and Jim O'Keefe took one apart, they have a 6809 processor in them.
Yep, that is true.
Like, how cool is that? I mean, that's a lot of engineering that went into that. Like, no wonder those printers were expensive.
Yeah, that's true. It is kind of funny to think back in those days, you'd have peripherals like that, and printers and probably modems and stuff like that had processors that were essentially the same, or at least in the running to be the same as the processors on the computers connected to them. Nowadays, you might still get that on some things, like some of the higher end printers or whatever, but a lot of stuff, there's practically nothing, or at least compared to the CPU in your PC, the CPUs at the other end of a cable are practically nothing.
Oh, yeah, it's just a tiny little circuit board and there's barely anything there.
Yeah. Anyway, will we beat this one to death, or is there more to say?
I think that's a wrap.
Well, I'm sure there's more to be said from somewhere, and that is why we have the feedback segment. So if you have a good use for printers, for retro printers, or if you think collecting retro printers is the dumbest thing ever, or anything in between, and you got something to say, we would love to hear it. Please send us some feedback. All right, well, that's the end of this discussion. We can take a break and probably be back with some technical discussions and maybe a games review, and take care.
Hey, CoCo Crew, original gamer Stevie Stroh here, and I want to wish you both a very happy and prosperous new year, and I hope the CoCo Crew podcast continues to thrive in 2016. I'm extremely thankful for a lot of events towards the end of 2015, including meeting the color computer community, winning a fully loaded Neil Blanchard original color computer 3 off of eBay, and also playing Christmas Rush with my daughter, which we really appreciated. So thanks so much, guys, for both the CoCo Crew podcast and the CoCo Crew community. Long live the CoCo.
All right, welcome back. This is John, and I'm going to talk you through a little tech segment here. I'm going to try to quickly cover the 6551 based peripherals that were common for the CoCo, and maybe a little extra. So yeah, we're going to talk about a peripheral this time. So we've covered all the, maybe not all, but we've covered quite a bit of architectural bits on the CoCo 1, 2, and 3 now, and of course the dragging along with it to some degree. And so now we're going to have to start talking about some of the common peripherals. And so I figured we'd start with the Deluxe RS-232 pack, which seems to continue to be relatively sought after, probably because it actually is one of the more useful things to have, depending on how you define useful and what you're trying to do with your CoCo. But serial ports, despite having largely disappeared from normal PCs, they are still relatively available through USB adapters. And you can do cool things over serial ports, especially when it comes to remote development and that sort of thing. Anyway, people still seem to want these devices. But so anyway, we're going to talk about the RS-232 pack and probably cover a bit about the Direct Connect modem pack, which it turns out is kind of a relative, and maybe throw in a few other bits here and there. Let's get started. So the Deluxe RS-232 pack and the Direct Connect modem pack both are based around the MOS Technologies 6551 ACIA, which is what Advanced Communications Interface Adapter. Basically, in Intel parlance, it would be called a UART. Maybe that's a more generic term for a Universal Asynchronous Receiver Transmitter. Yeah, maybe that's not any more clear than ACIA, but it seems to be the more common term. Anyway, it's just a chip that is essentially a parallel to serial interface for transmitting data between computers. And this particular one was relatively commonly used back in the day, and even maybe to some degree continues to be commonly used, depending on who's doing the using. Certainly has had a long life in both originally in small computer systems and then later in embedded systems, where serial communications continue to be a strong competitor or whatever until relatively recent times, and perhaps even continues. Anyway, as I said, the 6551 ACIA was a product of MOS Technologies, which was I guess it was acquired by Commodore pretty early on. Certainly was part of Commodore for some time. The 6551 was, I guess, intended as basically a companion chip for the 6502 microprocessor. 6502, of course, was the nearly ubiquitous processor in the 80s. It was in the Commodore PET and the Apple II and the Commodore 64 and VIC-20 and any number of other machines of the era. Not all of those had 6551s in them. We'll go on that just a minute. Anyway, so this serial port chip from MOS Technologies sort of competed with a chip from Motorola called the Motorola 6850, which was similar in some ways. Certainly had similar capabilities. The 6551, I think, was a little more flexible in terms of the clocking. Both of them allowed you to have a certain amount of flexibility in applying clock divisors to an input clock, a single input clock. But the 6850 really only had 3 divisions, divided by, I guess, by 1, and then by 16, and by 64, so that's really only by 2, I guess. But the 6551 could divide by, had 15 different settings for all the standard serial clock rates off of a common crystal frequency, which I don't have right at my fingertips. Anyway, the 6551 could generate a number of common baud rates from a single clock input, whereas the 6850 basically needed a more exact clock input to match either the baud rate you're trying to reach or some fixed multiple of it. So I imagine that is part of why the 6551 seems to have been a lot more common. Although of note, the 6850 seems to be more commonly used for MIDI interfaces. That's the musical device interface or whatever. And in fact, the CoCo MIDI pack, I think, is based around the 6850. So, go figure. Anyway, it's a popular chip. It had a number of other suppliers. I noted that there are Synertec and Rockwell 6551 chips out in the world. There might be some others. Synertec and Rockwell were also second sources for the 6502, and so it's probably all kind of a package deal for cross-licensing, whatever. As for usage, like I said, the 6551 was used in the Commodore PET. It is the chip in the Apple II's Super Serial card, and probably any number of other serial ports of the era, especially ones that were connected to either Motorola or MOS CPUs. It's almost a safe bet that most of them were using 6551s. It just was very common. As for usage related to the CoCo or the Dragon, as I said, it was used in the Deluxe RS-232 pack. It also is the serial port component of the Direct Connect modem pack, the other half of that, of course, being the modem chip. There is a 6551 inside the Dragon 64 and the Tano Dragon, which basically is a Dragon 64. Also notable is a few years back, Roger Taylor had a couple of designs. He had a Bluetooth communications pack, and I think he had one that was a USB storage pack. I forget exactly what he called them, but underneath, at least the Bluetooth one and I think the USB one were essentially clones of the Deluxe RS-232 pack. And so, for example, I've got his Bluetooth pack, and I run software for it that actually runs equally well on the Deluxe RS-232 pack. I use that as part of my development environment. Anyway, sometimes you can do clever things by reusing a design. Features of the chip, basically there's 4 registers. There's a data register, so read and write. There's a status register to you read that to tell if there's data available to read or if the transmit is open for you to write. A few other things like the flow control status, that sort of thing. And then there's a command register and a control register. Not sure, I guess they just needed different names because there's 2 different registers. I'm not really sure why one's command, one's control, but the command register sets up things like, whether to respond to data terminal ready, when to interrupt, if you receive, whether or not to interrupt when you receive something. You set up your parity settings, stuff like that. The control register has the stop bits and the word length, and that's where you select your clock for driving your baud rate. So there's just 4 bits for controlling the hardware, or 4 registers for controlling the hardware. As I mentioned, the 6551 has a number of settings related to turning the clock input into a baud rate, something like 15 values. And then there's so there's 15 values that cover everything from as low as 50 baud, 75, 110, 135, 150, 300, 600, 1200, 1800, 2400, 3600, 4800, 7200, 9600, and 192. Then there's one that says 16 times external clock. And I think if you do the math, that will work out to 115,200 bits per second. But I think that maybe is unreliable, or maybe there's some speculation about that. I know Roger Taylor, I think, was an advocate that would work in many cases. There's some bugs that are common with the 6551 hardware, and I think maybe that trips people up, so it makes that baud rate not as reliable. So let's talk about the bugs. So there is a bug with the CTS signal. That's the clear to send, and so CTS is used for flow control, hardware flow control, and paired with the RTS, or request to send signal. And it's basically supposed to be like 2 flags to say and it's how the two sides negotiate who can send and who can't, or whether or not you can send across. And the problem is, as the way most people interpret it, the receiving side can drop the CTS to say, okay, I'm full now, or I will be full when you get done, but it's not necessary, or at least most people don't seem to intend it to mean stop immediately. And the problem being that the 6551 sees it the other way, so as soon as he sees CTS, his transmitter will stop, even if he's in the middle of transmitting a byte. And so, since asynchronous serial communication sort of depends on sending out bits over a specified period of time, this is going to result in what's called a framing error. Basically, it means that the receiving side expects to see a stop bit. It doesn't get one, and basically things are screwed up for a while. There's not really a software workaround for that. It just sort of is how the hardware works or doesn't work. Sockmaster has an article on his website that describes a fix that he did that basically removes the CTS signal from going to the 6551, and then he reroutes it and regenerates it himself. I haven't read the article in a while, so it's not fresh in my mind, but you can it's a hardware bug that you can work around with a hardware fix, but you can't really work around it in software, at least not reliably, or no way that I'm aware of. I have seen many places assert that if you get the CMOS version of the 6551, so that's the 65C51, that fixed the CTS bug. So you might consider, if you are worried about that, or if you want to use it at higher speeds, that you get the 65C51 chip and see if that works. But you still may want to be a little wary, because also, while doing a little research, I found that there's a transmit data register empty bug, where there's a flag in the status bit to say the transmit data register is empty or ready to receive data, but it's always stuck on, so that it always looks like it's ready even when it's not. And so you can overflow the transmit queue. That report I saw says it was from October of 2013, so not that long ago. Said that Western Digital was aware of the problem and were working on it. The Western Digital folks, I'm sorry if you're not familiar, Western Digital is kind of the heir to MOS Technologies, and they're still building most of these, or a lot of these 65XX related parts, like the 6502 and 65816 and that sort of thing, including the 65 51 apparently, and maybe the 6522, which is the VIA. We haven't really talked about that because CoCo doesn't use it. But anyway, those guys are still active and they're still making some changes and doing some stuff. So I don't know. Maybe if you get a brand new 2016 65C51, maybe the transmit data register empty bit, it works correctly there. I don't know. Maybe that bug showed up later, so maybe if you should go with a 2009 or 2010 version, maybe it's going to work. I don't know, your mileage may vary, but it's possible you can get a version of the 6551 that doesn't have the CTS bug, but it might have other bugs. So there you go. Anyway, so moving on, I thought I'd talk a little bit about the software that comes with these devices. So on the Deluxe RS-232 pack, the built-in software, which it's on ROM, but it does not auto start. You have to do an exec of 49152, or I use the hexadecimal and ampersand HCOOO. Yeah, exec 49152. That'll to start the software. The software that runs, if you've ever run the Color Compact software, which is serial communication software that runs over the Bitbanger port, the software on the Deluxe RS-232 pack seems almost identical. I would not be surprised if it literally is identical except for the serial port handling routines. It certainly has the same menus, the same options, is operated in the same way. Anyway, it's pretty rudimentary. You start off with a menu screen that lets you change serial settings like 7 bits versus 8 bits, or no parity, or even or odd parity, or how many stop bits, that sort of thing. And let you check off what kind of modem you're using, because this is how old the software is. It goes back to the days where you had some modems could auto dial and some couldn't. I remember back as a kid, I actually used the Color Compact software with a modem that I had to dial the phone myself and wait for the devil's screech. And then I'd have to flip the switch to turn the modem on. That was with the Bitbanger, but if I was using the Deluxe RS-232 pack, I would have had to do the same thing, apparently. Anyway, the software has basic terminal functionality, so you can connect and type at one keyboard and see it at the other side. You know, you could do that if you want to just chat with your friends, if you're that kind of a geeky person with a geeky friend, or if you wanted to connect to, say, CompuServe or something like that. And check your email or whatever. So like I said, there was basic terminal functionality. There were possibilities for transferring files, but it's a little different. It's a little weird. It's not like in later days when you could hook up and run Z-modem or something like that. There really weren't any protocols involved here. So basically you set it up and you could do either basic or machine language. But either way, I think it basically just sent raw bytes of data, and the only difference was in BASIC, I think it just sent ASCII code for the source in your BASIC program, and in machine language, it just sent the actual bytes from memory for your block of memory that you said was your machine language program. But no translation, no protocols, no error checking, no nothing. It's bare bones. It does work. I have used it. I did some initial development when I started back developing for the CoCo. Before I had a good development environment set up, I was able to transfer machine language programs that way. So if you have an RS-232 pack and you're desperate for a way to get machine language code onto your CoCo, well, there you go. Okay, one last thing in the Deluxe RS-232 packs is it has support for what it calls a store and forward mode. And basically this was a way to fill a buffer on your machine, either fill it up and then connect and transmit it out automatically, or vice versa, connect and then fill a buffer with like news or information or whatever. Sort of like an even simpler version of file transfer, or it's more like filling up the modem log on some terminal software. But, anyway, it was a kind of a remnant of the day when telephone calls were pretty expensive, and you connect up to CompuServe and download the latest news and then disconnect, and you could read it on your own. In fact, I imagine that's quite similar to how it was to use the I want to say the AgVision terminals or the the equivalent. I can't think of what they're called now. Just saw them on eBay recently, but the serial data terminals that look like the old CoCo. Maybe Neil can pop in and remind me of what they were called when he edits this.
I believe what you're thinking of is the TRS-80 Videotex terminal.
All right, so moving on. So I thought that the Direct Connect modem software was going to be identical to what's on the Deluxe RS-232 pack, which of course is essentially identical to the Color Compact. But just to be sure, I took a Direct Connect modem and plugged it into a CoCo here, and the software is actually quite different, or at least it looks quite a bit different. It appears, unfortunately I have some documentation, I was reading through it. It looks like there's sort of better terminal support, so you can do a few more things or type a few more kinds of characters or whatever. There actually is support for the true lowercase modes in the later CoCos. The software does have support for some file transfers, but it appears to be limited to transferring basic programs as ASCII source files, or just not even a file, just as ASCII text in the transfer. Although it does claim to have X modem support, I'm not really sure why you need it, but I guess if the other side talks X modem, maybe that's why you need it. There is printer support. Oh, I should say the Deluxe RS-232 pack did support the printer, but only in the store and forward mode. So you could store and forward and then dump stuff to a printer. The Direct Connect modem does seem to have printer support that looks like it can stream stuff out to the printer, so while it's going to the screen, it can go to the printer. Maybe the Deluxe RS-232 pack could do that too. I'm not sure. I don't know. It looks like the Direct Connect modem software has a little bit better printer support. I think you can at least change baud rates and stuff for the printer. I don't know. The fact is that the 300 baud modem attached to the Direct Connect modem is essentially useless these days, so it may not really matter what the software can do unless you're just a really retro kind of person that gets off on the notion of connecting up two machines over the modem these days. So anyway, that's the software that comes with them. Doesn't do a lot, kind of enough to make them do something. It's probably reasonably useful back in the day. I know I used the Color Compact on a different modem connected to the Bitbanger and thought it was okay software, not great, but it was reasonably useful. So the stuff on the Deluxe RS-232 pack is probably similarly okay, not great, but kind of useful. I think probably any other software that exists for the CoCo that's terminal software, whether it's Mickey Term or Greggy Term or whatever else is out there, those are probably much better. So that's probably a better way to make use of your serial ports if you want to use it for any of the kind of standard purposes. OS 9 does come with drivers for I think supports both of these, even though they're very similar hardware, but they are addressed at slightly different addresses, so you can plug both of them in at the same time to like a multi-pack or something like that, and they should both work. OS 9 can support that. About all there is to say, like I said, there is one neat hack that's pretty well documented. Let me see if I can find a reference here. I'll find it. I'll put a link in the show notes. It's not that hard to find. I just can't seem to find it while I'm trying to talk. There is a relatively simple hack, in the truest sense of the word hack, that can convert the Direct Connect modem into the equivalent of a Deluxe RS-232 pack. And in that, you literally take the circuit board out of the modem pack and cut half of it off. Basically, you cut the modem half off. You solder a couple of jumpers between the exposed traces that are left there to kind of reconnect them for power and ground and that sort of thing. And then you add another little circuit board that takes the signals coming off of the 6551 that are basically TTL level digital signals, 5 volts, 0 to 5 volts, and converts them to the plus or minus 12 volts or something closer to that at least, that are required for RS-232 signaling. And so it's a neat little hack. I've always thought it'd be cool to do. Haven't quite gotten around to doing it. But if you're looking for a neat hack to do in a CoCo, that might be a cool thing to do, is to hack it into hack your direct connect modem into the equivalent of the deluxe RS-232 pack, and then who knows what else you can do. And again, I think I mentioned this earlier, but if you have a Dragon 64 or a Tano Dragon, they do have a 6551 on the motherboard. This is the built-in serial port they have instead of the Bitbanger. So any software that you have that you might make use of with the deluxe RS-232 pack, it should be at least adaptable to run on the serial port that's on the Dragon. I've got the software I use for running a development monitor, debugger, or whatever on the Direct Connect modem pack equivalent that I mentioned earlier, the Bluetooth pack from Roger Taylor. I've been meaning to get that ported over to the Dragon and see if I can get that out for public consumption. Haven't got there yet, but feel free to nag me and send me some feedback saying how desperately you need that, and I'll continue to work on it. Anyway, that's probably plenty said, but there's not a lot more to say about the Deluxe RS-232 pack or the Direct Connect modem pack. It really is it's basically just this 6551 ACIA chip just on a board and with just enough circuitry to make it actually useful. And that's the truth in sort of in both the cases, the Deluxe RS-232 pack especially, and then the modem pack is just that with a modem chip on the end of it. It does enable a lot of functionality, being able to do serial port transfers. People talked over serial ports for a long time, still do. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do with it. It's probably the simplest way to get two machines to communicate. So, there's lots of projects you can do that involve that sort of communication. You can make it talk to, your PC or to an Arduino or whatever else. So, if you're into any of that, you definitely should want to get one of these packs for your CoCo. So there, I've blown it again. We're going to make all the eBay prices go through the roof. That's probably enough. I've talked long enough. So I hope you've enjoyed this technical segment. I know it went a little fast. I don't think it went too deep this time. Maybe I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, send me some feedback. Let me know what you think. If I've left anything else, if I've left anything out, or if you have any questions, again, send us some feedback and let us know. And that's just it. I hope you've enjoyed this segment. And happy CoCoing, CoCo forever, whatever else. All right, we'll see you at CoCo Fest.
Get ready, player 1. Get ready, player 2.
Welcome back to the Games Corner. Wow, has it been a month already? Aren't we still playing Farfall? Well, I certainly am. As I mentioned before, the cartridge lives in slot 1 on my multi-pack. Well, on this episode, I will be reviewing another one of my favorite Color Computer 1 and 2 games from back in the day. This game is called Dragon Slayer. This game was made in 1984 and coded by a guy named Olaf Schroeder? Hope I pronounced his name right. And published by the famous Tom Mix software label that brought many of great games to the Color Computer. Dragon Slayer required a Color Computer 1 or 2 with 32K RAM and disk drive. And of course the floppy disk was also heavily copy protected. Dragon Slayer is a platform adventure style game. It has a whopping 160 screens to complete. It breaks down to 16 screens per level and a total of 10 levels. Why I like this game is it requires the player to figure out puzzles and obstacles in each screen. To clear a screen, you need to collect objects, and sometimes these objects might be on a previous screen. Some of the objects you have to get are planks to build a bridge, ropes to hook onto hooks for climbing up or down a platform, boots to cross tall grass, buckets to get water for growing magic vines, and much more. Every screen is a new challenge and requires a player to really think. My sister and I spent many hours playing this game when we got our first CoCo. Obviously, the object of this game is to complete all 160 screens and slay the dragon. I've never come close to finishing this game, but have made it about halfway. It's definitely a lot harder than it looks. If anyone has finished this game, I'd really like to hear from you. Please drop me a line. This game is one of the bigger 32K games for the Color Computer 1 and 2 platform, and I always thought the graphics were nice on it. They even hold up well today as I sit and play this game for my review on it. On a side note, Speaking of graphics, there was a guy named Jason Law that used to be involved in the color computer community a few years back, and he was coding a brand new Color Computer 3 version of this game to take advantage of the 16-color RGB graphics. He was looking for a working copy of this game that wasn't broken like the image that was floating around on the web at the time. Apparently it has corrupt graphics in the later levels. He needed a full working version so he could draw and create all the levels for his new version in true exact form. So I sent him my floppy disk of this game in the mail. Well, from what I can tell, he had it almost all finished, and then he just seemed to have disappeared from the community. A real shame if you ask me. I was looking forward to a Color Computer 3 release of this game. Well, it just gives us another excuse to use our Color Computer 1 or 2 for this game. Hope I encourage you to give this game a whirl. If you don't have it, you can find it on the CoCo Archive website. We'll be sure to put the link in the show notes. Well, until next month, happy CoCo gaming. Well, it's that time again. We have reached the end of episode 9. We hope you enjoyed the show. I would like to thank my host, John Linville, for providing the 6551 Deluxe RS-232 Pack Tech segment. I found this segment extra interesting as I once ran a BBS back in the day. We'd also like to thank all of you for listening. You are the most important part of the show. Again, if we didn't have you tuning in, there'd be no point in making this podcast. Stay tuned for next month's show. Oh, and did we forget to mention? Only 2 more months until CoCo Fest. See you all there.